And it is my very great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Hassan Jabareen, who founded Adalah, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, in 1996. He has served as Adalah's General and Legal Director since its establishment. He holds an LLB in Law and a BA in Philosophy from Tel Aviv University, an LLM in International Human Rights from American University Washington College of Law, and a PhD in Law from Hebrew University. He has litigated scores of landmark constitutional law cases regarding Palestinian citizens of Israel and international humanitarian law cases concerning Palestinians in the 1967 occupied territory before the Israeli Supreme Court. Dr. Jabareen has also written widely on defending the rights of Palestinians in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories. It's a very great honor to have you with us tonight, Dr. Jabareen. Over to you.
Thank you. Let's start. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. We are in Adalah, represent the university, Birzeit University, in this case on the restrictions that put, in fact, on all the Palestinian university and the limitation of any professor, foreign professor who want to enter and to teach, or foreign students that they want to come. In fact, we started this case in 2019, and we found that the policy, in fact, that apply to universities, it's the same policy that apply to any person who want to enter the West Bank and Gaza. Any person who want to enter these areas, he will be examined by Israeli army. Israeli army refused to put the criteria who are the persons that allowed to enter and to leave the West Bank. Usually they say that it's based on security discretions and the discretions of the army. This reached the level that even for family unification, Palestinian cannot enter the West Bank and Gaza if he's not resident of the West Bank and Gaza, or any person who has a family member in West Bank and Gaza cannot enter. And if a person even married, if a person from West Bank or Gaza married a person abroad, they won't have this person have the right to enter, meaning Israel law doesn't recognize that there is a right to any person in the world to enter West Bank and Gaza. Israel law also doesn't recognize that there is a right for the Palestinian people to have family unification, or to have the right that specific groups that they have interest with, that they can enter. And early in the 1970s, those cases were brought before Israeli Supreme Court. And the argument of the petitioners was that the law of occupation allow the people under occupation to manage their lives like any other people. It's part of their right of self-determination. The international humanitarian law allow them to have family unification, allow them to have a group that to enter for economic reason or any reason. It's enough that there is interest. And the law of occupation, especially Article 43 of Hague regulations, put duty in Israel army to let the people manage their daily life. The Israeli Supreme Court rejected this position, and the position was that since the West Bank and Gaza are managed by Israeli army, so they are under security discretion of the army. The army is the only sovereign, and the army is allowed to allow any person to enter and to refuse any person to enter or to leave the West Bank and Gaza. And the Supreme Court even refused to ask the army to put the criteria in which cases they will use their discretion. The only thing that it was accepted that any case for a humanitarian reason will allow the person to enter. What is the criteria to define a humanitarian case? There is no criteria to define what is a humanitarian case. This is why the policy is arbitrary policy. So what about cases of professors that Birzeit University want to absorb to come to teach in Birzeit University? Since there is no regulation, they have to apply, not the university, the professor himself, to apply to enter as any person who wants to enter the West Bank. Usually they give them, if they accept their request, a tourist visa. And despite the fact that the professor or the person who wants to teach or to work in Birzeit University will write, I am coming to Ramallah in order to teach or to work in Birzeit University, and I am asking for work permit, Israel refused to give work permit. Meaning, while Israel knows that he is going to Birzeit University, while they know the reason why he is coming to the West Bank, they refuse to give him any permit that recognize him as a worker, and thus he will become as a tourist visa for 3 months. This the best scenario if his motion will be accepted. So after 3 months, he has to renew, and many of them we found in 2019 survey found that almost half of the people who from abroad that they want to join Palestinian universities in West Bank and Gaza, half of them were rejected or have problems to enter. And the majority of those halves belong to Birzeit University. So this is the case that we had. So we ask ourselves with Birzeit University what to do. To continue with this strategy that the professors or the person who want to come to teach or to work in Birzeit to apply, we against that in principle and legally. The right in this case is the right of the university, not to any other person, the right of the university to have academic freedom and to recruit any person that they want. So the university must ask, the university must request, and of course, we have to ask to have criteria, clear criteria that belong to this group that want to teach, to work in the universities in West Bank and Gaza. Now, we made comparative with the Israeli universities. Israeli universities, they have clear regulations, both by Interior Ministry. The university itself, Hebrew University, for example, if they want to recruit any person from abroad, Hebrew University apply to the Interior Ministry. Within 45 days, the Interior Ministry must give them final answer. And the discretion and who decide what kind of professor, teacher, work staff I need is the university, and usually they give those professors or the foreigners permit for 5 years, work permit with the university, and they will give them permit also to bring their families. Now we ask to have clear regulations like those regulations that apply to Israeli university. So the first letter that we asked for special regulations, we made immediately the comparison case between the situation of the Palestinian universities and the Israeli universities. And that's comparison, I think, in my opinion, was the most powerful in our case, even was more powerful than using the international humanitarian law, because immediately give the clue that we are going to speak about the case of apartheid on education. And when we send our letters to ask for special regulations, immediately the campaign of Birzeit University abroad started to hit. And in fact, we were surprised that we got answered, and the army agreed to put regulations and special regulations for to apply to Palestinian universities. But we found that those regulations are very, very problematic. For example, the regulations said that first, the person himself, he is the person or she that they should apply, not the university. Second, it's give full discretion to the army to reject or to accept. And they say that we will accept cases when the army is convinced that the person is needed for the economy in the West Bank, and he is a good asset for the peace and economy in the area. So it was serious critique against those regulations, and we continue the case. We rejected that, and we said, in fact, we continue with our case here. They have the right, the university has the right of academic freedom, like Hebrew University, and they have to ask to have the right to ask any person within the reasonable reasons to come and to work in Birzeit University. And after we challenge that, they cancel some of the problematic provisions, such as that the person must or the army must be convinced that the person will bring serious contribution to the economy and to contribute to the peace in the area. They cancel that. They cancel also limitation that they put in the number of students to come and number of professors that we also against. But still, now we are in a stage that we still have many other problems in those regulations that we continue to fight, to challenge. We didn't reach the Supreme Court yet. We challenged through correspondence and with also the campaign of Birzeit University. The serious problems now still that we don't know what's the content of discretion that the army will use, because they said, well, the person can apply or the university can apply on behalf of the person, but the army will have discretion and any relevant reason to reject, they are allowed to use. We don't know what's the meaning of relevant reasons. This is one of the serious problems, that we don't know what kind of discretion they want to use. The second problem, that we don't have time limitations, like a person can apply or the university can apply. We don't know when we may have a final answer for that. Now, we continue with our letters with the army to discuss that. If the situation will continue, we have to discuss the issue with Birzeit University and to ask the big question whether we go further step to apply to file a petition before Israeli Supreme Court. In this matter, we have many complicated issues that we have to discuss with the university about taking this step before Israeli Supreme Court. What we can say that, yes, we succeeded to raise the issue in the last 3 years. Yes, we succeeded to push the army to put regulations, and we think that the subject of apartheid in academia was strong here. That was helpful for us, and the campaign of the international campaign of the University, Birzeit University, was very helpful. However, we still have serious limitations, serious problems in those small details that create for us a problem. Today, if we apply, we don't know when we got answer, and if we refuse, we don't know exactly what were the relevant discretions that the army used. So we are continuing, and we are in this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jabareen. Our next speaker, who will be able to carry on from this, is we're very honored to have Professor Beshara Doumani, the 5th President of Birzeit University, and a historian whose research focuses on social lives of ordinary people who've been neglected in mainstream scholarship. He is the inaugural Mahmoud Darwish Professor of Palestinian Studies, the first chair of its kind dedicated to this field. He is also the founding director of Brown University's Center for Middle East Studies, the CMES, and founder of New Directions for Palestinian Studies, a CMS initiative since 2012. From 2012 to 2020, he was the Joukowsky Family Distinguished Professor of Modern Middle East History. Professor Doumani has published widely on the early modern and modern Middle East. His books include Rediscovering Palestine, Merchants and Peasants in Jabal Nablus, 1700 to 1900, and Family Life in the Ottoman Mediterranean, A Social History. We very much look forward to hear what you have to say about how restrictions affect higher education in Palestine. Professor Doumani.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, all of you, for taking the time this evening. It's an honor to be with you, and I really sincerely appreciate all the support that you give Birzeit University and Palestinian struggle for justice in general, and I salute all the good work that you do. I will be brief. The big picture, as I see it, is this. Birzeit University is, yes, punches above its weight in terms of symbolic significance to the Palestinian political culture, but it is still a university, and the first one in Palestine, and the most important one in Palestine, and one that deserves a great deal of support, even if everything was resolved positively tomorrow, politically speaking. We still, Palestinians, have a society to build. And Birzeit University is one of the few institutions with the kind of integrity and legacy and capability of playing a very important part in building this society. So getting rid of a settler colonial regime is but the first step on a much longer road. And I see Birzeit University as not only very important to the future after, but also as a model for how Palestinians can organize themselves now to and demonstrate within the confines of the university itself the kind of social contracts with its employees, its relationship to its students, its vision of what knowledge production is about, what purposes it serves, etc., as a model for the kind of society that we can build. And I think the Israeli restrictions on higher education in Palestine, in a way, have that in mind. That is to say, they're not only dedicated to putting these institutions under siege and creating conditions for failure, but they're also interested in blocking out or erasing that possible vision for a just and dignified future. especially when it's led by the so-called institutions of civil society, such as universities. In the case of Birzeit, this is as you know it very well, a non-profit university, and one that's dedicated to the social good. So the kind of restrictions on this institution, as Hassan said, are not new. He went back to 2017, 2018, 2019. That is true. That's when a kind of a formal process of legally challenging some of the policies that are put in place to create a siege of the universities. That's true, but actually it began with the occupation itself, and especially, of course, with the founding of Birzeit as a university in 1972. It's an institution, as you know, that goes back to 1924, but in 1972, it declared itself to be a university, and as soon as that happened, we saw many attempts to lay siege to that university. When I was there in the early 1980s, we had to fight against Military Order 854, which made it conditional on anyone that does not possess an Israeli-issued Palestinian ID that gives them the right of residency, of course, not citizenship or anything like this, in the so-called West Bank and Gaza, etc., must sign a piece of paper that says that the PLO is a terrorist organization, otherwise their work permit will not be issued. And when professors refused to sign that declaration, their work permits were either revoked or not issued at all, and Birzeit lost more than half of its foreign faculty. By foreign, I don't mean people who are not Palestinian. That many of them are Palestinians, but they don't have a Palestinian ID. I was one of them. I remained and I worked there illegally, but for many, that was not an option. And we can give many examples of such as closures, for example. During the first Intifada, Birzeit University was closed for 4 years. And many other times, it was a month's closure, 6 months closure, a 2-week closure. It differed according to period. Not a problem after Oslo, I must say. There was no closure like we experienced before Oslo. But the danger of Oslo and the kind of realities created for Palestinian higher education in a way gave us even greater challenges, but that's a topic for another time. What I mean to say is that universities cannot survive without being plugged into the global currents of thought, of intellectual innovation, etc. That is part of their nature. And when we are not able to have any kind of normalcy as an institution due to raids into the campus, arrests of students, movement restrictions, intimidation at checkpoints, and other systematic attempts to isolate universities on the ground. For example, 30% of our students at Birzeit University used to be from Gaza. The number now is 0, for example, because of restrictions on movement. And so we're not able to create the kind of diverse professorial staff and student landscape that we had before. Universities have become kind of regionalized to a certain extent. But beyond all of that, there is the issue of connection to the rest of the world and other universities. And this is where a lot of the procedures that Hassan was talking about are very relevant. Basically, the set of rules that they've been putting into practice, but were forced to put into writing due to our legal action clearly show that Palestinian universities have been denied the right to control, basic control actually, over their academic decisions, such as who it hires, why it hires them, in what disciplines, etc., as professors. Rather, it gives the Israeli military absolute power to select which international faculty, academic researchers, and students might be present at Palestinian universities. And that has made our life extremely difficult. Now, in a way, this can be an opportunity for Birzeit to connect with all of you and with others to say the model of what you think university is doesn't really apply to us because of these restrictions, and we need your support and help. In other words, it could be an important tool for mobilizing international solidarity, legal action, as what happened with Adalah, etc. And we do turn these kinds of crises and forms of repression into opportunities for resistance and mobilization. And we're not shy about that. We think the case speaks for itself. If you read carefully these procedures, you realize that it is a system of academic appetite, clearly. So at the same time, I think that it's difficult to continue operating as we do if we don't have really strong connections on a practical, everyday level with people like yourself. Statements of solidarity, et cetera, are absolutely essential to creating a cultural environment which allows us to survive. But we need more than that. We need to see if we can work out ways in which, whether online or in person, we can find modes of creating relations between students here and students there, faculty here and faculty there. For example, Birzeit University is somewhat distinguished from other universities in Palestine in that it takes the social sciences and humanities very seriously. And we created the first PhD program in the social sciences. And we need people like yourselves to come and maybe even online teach a one-week set of texts to our students, etc., that does not require getting a visa for an entire year, etc., even though we'd love to have you with us for an entire year. And I can multiply this example in many different ways. So I guess I'll conclude by saying that running a university under occupation is not an easy thing. They often don't give us the time, opportunity, or means to really allow these students and these faculty to live up to their full potential. At the same time, we learn many important lessons in the struggle that I think gives us insights into larger global challenges that all of us are facing in this world, whether it's the question of incarceration or climate change or forms of surveillance, or what does it mean to produce knowledge that serves a social good, et cetera, that I'm sure you can relate to in your own institutions. And I think that makes us kind of important partners for joint research and other kinds of projects, which I hope that we can find ways of doing that can break through this siege that we're facing right now. And thank you. And excuse my voice, I'm not feeling my best at this time.
Thank you so much, Professor Doumani. And right now, I'd like to invite anyone in the audience to put in chat in any questions you have for either of our speakers. That would be very, very helpful. See if we can get a bit of a discussion going. I think it's really interesting what you've just said about the possibilities of remote connections sort of subverting these restrictions to a certain amount. And of course, since the pandemic, that's something we've all become very used to doing. It doesn't feel such an alien thing as it did before. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, as how using that as an opportunity.
Gladly. We just held what is perhaps the largest conference on the history of mandate, so-called mandate. I don't like that term at all. It's a legal term that covers up a colonial violent occupation by Britain. 17 panels of 5 persons each over a 3-day period at Birzeit University. And that's not everybody who works on the mandate period. And we had people from Poland to I don't know, Chile to South Africa to China participate in this. And we held it both physically and online. We had 2, because there were so many panels, they had 2 different halls that had concurrent running panels, plus online presence and participation. And somehow it worked. Now, this is an example that is very typical, of course. It's much more difficult to learn how to teach online. And my personal experience at Brown University before I came to Birzeit is that the transition from physical presence to online teaching meant that each course took 2 to 3 times as much work from me as it previously did. And that kind of pedagogical experience that you all gained in your institutions is one that we would benefit from at Birzeit University, because you had all sorts of support, discussion, innovation, professional people working on this issue day and night to try to figure out how to do it right. Whereas at Birzeit, we were lucky if we could just get the internet working and get the people actually to have the time to figure out what a regular schedule is without closures and everything else. So that would be something that does not require a visa for teaching for a whole year, but it could be very important to join us in a project of rethinking the pedagogy of online teaching under conditions of occupation, for example. And I can give other examples. We have tried to be flexible as much as possible. For example, even if we want to get students for 1 semester, the Israelis will only give them a 3 months visa, whereas a semester is 4 months. So they have to leave before the semester is over, and they refuse to let them back. So what we have done is created special semesters for international students that are 3 months long, for example. But we would love to have these students for longer periods because they would like to stay, but it's not renewed. So we are open to all forms that you can imagine or we can imagine of breaking through the siege. And may I just say something here that is very important. I know I talked too long for this answer, and I'm using it to actually say something else, so forgive me. But I alluded to the question of quote-unquote civil society. We have seen the Israeli government go after human rights, cultural, and other kinds of institutions such as Al-Haq in the past 2 or 3 years. Of course, they've been going after them for a long time, but I mean, try to basically outlaw them as terrorist organizations. I think if that works and they somehow sell it to the rest of the world, and they'll be coming after the universities next. And we don't want Birzeit University to be outlawed as a terrorist institution. And I'm sure they're preparing the legal groundwork for that. So the more we are interconnected with the rest of the world, the more layers of protection we have against that possible future. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important point. since you mentioned the Mandate Conference, what particular duties do you think British citizens have to support Palestinian higher education?
Don't get me started. Yeah, I don't think that the Palestinians would be in the position they were in were it not for social, intellectual, and political movements primarily based in Britain since the 19th century. And so it's not just the quote-unquote mandate period that's at issue here. We're talking about an entire 19th century of, let's say, appropriating the Holy Land, quote-unquote, through a variety of means, from projects to convert Jews into good Christians, to to mapping and colonizing the country. And so I think Britain holds a very special responsibility in terms of the word I guess I'm looking for, and the one that's important, is one that's used by indigenous peoples everywhere, which is not just acceptance into a system that was established by a colonial or settler society, like in the United States. We're not looking just for recognition, we're looking for reparation. And we want decolonization not just to be a word, but actually an actual deed with money and land, everything else that's accompanied with it. And I think it may be difficult to imagine this happening in Britain now, but that's what must happen in the future. So that's my quick answer.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple of questions from the floor. As a student, how can I help the university with the difficulties that it is facing?
You're already doing it by attending this webinar and by asking this question. So you're, I think, about 90% there. And the rest is really up to you. I think it's fantastic if you can come and visit. We'll be happy to host you at Birzeit University and show you around. And seeing is believing. And we'll be happy if you can connect with people who work on issues that you care about, because I'm sure there must be some such people at the university, whether they're students or faculty. And we'll be happy to facilitate that as well. And we consider this as cultivating a long-term relationship that's measured in decades, not in just very specific actions today.
Excellent. So there you go, everybody. The welcome is there. So if you have ideas and you want to get involved, you know what to do. So the other question we have is, and I think, Hassan, this might be, well, actually it's for both of you, but is it becoming clear yet how the new rules that went into effect on 20th of October are affecting the ability of students and lecturers to come to the West Bank for education or work purposes?
Those rules that officially they said that they will be in effect on 20th of October, but lately they told us that they want to amend those rules. So those rules are not final, and they are still like in a process, and we're still in the situation of vagueness. If I may just give comments about the linkage between the case of the universities and Birzeit University and the case of the 6 Palestinian NGOs that they were declared as illegal and terrorist organization. We, with other lawyers, and Adalah with other lawyers, we represented and we continue to represent the 6 NGOs. 3 of them, we are Adalah, the lawyer of 3 of them. And the international campaign, the international support was very, very helpful in this case. This is why that Israel really doesn't implement seriously the decision. One of the reasons is the international campaign and the international support. This support came from international civil society, from students, from different campuses, and from states. And this also helped the organization that to put barrier on Israeli army to implement the decisions that they took against them. Of course, despite that, the NGOs still in unstable situation because there is decision against them, despite the fact that the implementation wasn't taking on, but still the fact that there is such a decision by itself is problematic. So now this show that really international campaign, international support from universities, from other different group, very helpful. Because we, the Palestinians, reached sometime a level that we said, well, international campaign, international support is not helpful because the occupation is continue to be on. But in fact, we have experiences that, yes, if it will be serious campaign and managed well, will be helpful. Now, the other aspect of that, the new Israeli government. The new Israeli government is much extreme, more extreme than the previous one. And the Minister of Defense might be not just racist person, but a settler person. Settler and racist, meaning his focus will be on the Palestinians in the West Bank. This is his target. And maybe he will take another direction and to start to implement against those NGOs. And then I think the nightmare of Beshara Doumani, our friend, might come because we have no explanation to the decision of outlawing those organizations, the 6 organizations, but the explanation that Israel right wing decided to destroy the Palestinian civil society and to destroy any serious critique against the occupation that come from the Palestinian civil society. And civil society is strong when they have strong and stable universities. Universities is serious part of civil society. So this is the dangerous will come. And this show again that why what Beshara said, that this support from abroad is very, very crucial and could take many, many different directions. It's not just come to teach or come to the university, even from your campuses, from your state, from your city, you can do a lot.
Thank you again to Dr. Hassan and Professor Beshara Doumani for a fantastic webinar, incredibly informative, and really connected people here to the particular struggle that higher education is facing in Palestine at this very moment. I should also thank Sundos, who I worked with setting up this this event from the Right to Education campaign at Birzeit, and her predecessor Carmen and Rina. Hello, thank you so much for helping out. I just want to end by saying thank you to everyone who's come. We've had a rich discussion. Of course, it was we had a wonderful overview from Professor Beshara about the history of the repression of higher education in Palestine. But as he pointed out, you know, the repression dates back to the origins of the university and beyond. But the repression has always been matched, as he also pointed out, by steadfast resistance from higher education in Palestine. And indeed, the founding of the university was followed shortly by an international campaign to support the university as it faced and confronted harsh repression from the Israeli occupation, which, as you've heard, continues to today. And one of the many initiatives that took place was the founding of Fobzu, which since 1978 has been supporting Birzeit and higher education in Palestine. And we will continue to fight against these measures and others and respond with something positive. As Professor Beshara said himself, these crises and problems create opportunities, and we never want to miss any of those. So this is an opportunity to redouble our efforts to oppose these particular restrictions and extend awareness about the ongoing repression of higher education. As we've heard a lot about the fight against these measures in the courts in Israel, but of course this is not a domestic issue, this is an international one. Israel as an occupying power ultimately has no sovereign right over the decision-making of Palestinian institutions, let alone Palestinian society and people. And therefore it's incumbent upon third-party states and citizens around the world to uphold their duty to Palestinians and the Palestinian people and make sure that they're not facing these measures alone.